So, Mark, you received an email from a reader basically asking if retirees might be able to look past the 4% rule and instead just own a portfolio of dividend paying stocks. Maybe we should just start at a high level and ask, what's the 4% rule? And could this idea work in theory?
Yeah, absolutely. So the 4% rule is a study that was done to try to come up with what's called a safe withdrawal rate. And a safe withdrawal rate is for retirement, how much you can take out of your account each year without running out of money. And there are two risks that retirees face. So one is longevity risk. You have no idea when your retirement will end or when you will die. So it makes it very hard to plan. The other risk is called sequencing risk. And what that basically means is that the order of returns that you get matter. And if you have really low returns at the beginning of retirement, you run out of money faster. And this makes sense because you are selling, of course, to fund your life, and you're selling low. And so that's what the 4% rule is designed to counteract, those twin risks. Now, if you think about a dividend portfolio, so you are just taking income out of your retirement account, in theory, you will never run out of money because you are not selling anything, you are just collecting income. So that helps with both the longevity risk and sequencing risk.
Okay, so if we kind of go a little bit more practical and look at Australia, obviously it's an equity market that on the face of it has a high dividend yield compared to other stock markets, which might make you think it's a promising place to try this strategy. Is it a double-edged sword?
A little bit, but to address that first point, yes, the challenge is that many markets, the dividend yield on the market, now there are some individual shares with higher yields, many markets, the overall dividend yield is well below 4%. So it means effectively you need a lot more money to retire. Australia, things are different. There are higher yields and there are franking credits. So you can get a 4% yield pretty easily in Australia. The challenge is that 4% rule only counts for the first year of retirement. After that, you are supposed to increase the amount you're taking out by inflation. And that's supposed to keep you in a steady state in terms of your living standards. So, and this can be for a long time. People can be retired for 30 years. So the dollar amount coming out of your account can increase a lot. So the challenge in Australia is for this to work, you need dividend growth to keep your same lifestyle that at least mirrors inflation. And you need it to be consistent because, of course, you don't want your spending to vary each year. And so in Australia, dividend policies typically are just a percentage of earnings. And so you get a lot of variability in dividends, especially as you follow the economic cycle. And mining is a perfect example. When we'll say iron ore is a proxy, when iron ore prices are really high, the miners typically pay really good dividends. But that is cyclical. And so then when iron ore prices are low, the dividends get cut significantly. And so that can be very challenging as a retiree because how are you making up for these shortfalls if you, of course, don't want to adjust your spending every year, which I think most people don't.
So the tax treatment of dividends is good, but then you talked about those two things you need, which is an element of growth in the dividends and also dependability. And that's where the Australian market might have some challenges.
Exactly. So, this is a trade-off, right? Companies that pay very high dividends typically are not growing as fast. So in Australia, we do have a lot of mature industries that are paying these high dividends. And of course, that means it's harder for them to maintain or grow that dividend. US, you get lower dividends, but typically there's more of a commitment not to cut a dividend and to grow. And so that's really the challenge that retirees have.
So in the article that you've written about this, you talk about a few ways that an investor might kind of approach those challenges. You talked about having a cash reserve potentially, and you also talked about looking beyond Australia and some of the trade-offs that brings. So what might a retiree do to kind of protect themselves from this?
Yeah, exactly. So one way to balance out the cyclicality in dividends is, as you said, to have a cash reserve. So in a very simplistic example, if one year I get $10,000 and then the dividends are cut in the next year and I get $7,500, well, if you keep some cash, you can make up for that shortfall. So that's one thing you can do. Now, obviously, there's an opportunity cost. The cash sitting there is not invested in dividend-paying shares. The other thing is, yes, balance between these high yields in Australia and potentially other markets like the US where there's more growth. Now, a lot of people don't like to do that because you don't get franking credits, and franking credits obviously are a benefit. But I think people need to appreciate that there is a benefit, particularly over a long retirement, in getting growth in dividends.
So as with everything in investing, you just have to consider the trade-offs.
Exactly.
Thank you very much, Mark.
Thank you.
This video has been prepared for clients of Morningstar Australasia Proprietary Limited and or New Zealand wholesale clients of Morningstar Research Limited. Any general advice has been provided without reference to your financial objectives, situation or needs. You should consider the advice in light of these matters and any relevant product disclosure statement before making any decision to invest. To obtain advice for your own situation, contact a financial advisor.